Most gardeners who talk about living soil genuinely care about soil life. They add compost, avoid chemicals, mulch beds, and maybe even brew the occasional tea. On the surface, it looks like everything is being done right, and yet, quietly, invisibly, beneficial bacteria die off by the billions in gardens every season. Not because of neglect, but because of one deeply ingrained mistake that almost everyone makes without realizing it. This mistake doesn't look dramatic. Plants don't collapse overnight. Instead, growth slowly dulls, resilience fades, and soil becomes dependent again. Understanding this mistake is the difference between soil that stays alive year after year and soil that constantly needs rescuing. Why beneficial bacteria are far more fragile than most gardeners realize. Beneficial bacteria are not passive residents of soil. They are active workers that rely on stable conditions to survive. They regulate nutrient exchange, break down organic matter, protect roots from pathogens, and communicate directly with plants through chemical signals. But unlike plants, bacteria cannot move away when conditions become hostile. When their environment shifts too quickly or too severely, populations crash. Once that happens, it can take months or years to rebuild what was lost, even if everything looks fine on the surface. The most common mistake is treating soil like a storage container instead of a living system. The single biggest mistake that kills beneficial bacteria is sudden, concentrated input. This includes heavy compost layering, strong organic fertilizers, excessive amendments, or frequent boosts meant to help plants. While these inputs are often labeled natural or organic, they can overwhelm soil biology. Bacteria thrive on steady, consistent food sources. When a large amount of organic material is dumped into soil all at once, microbial populations spike rapidly, oxygen is consumed, and beneficial species are outcompeted or suffocated. What follows is a collapse that leaves soil biologically weaker than before. Why too much organic matter at once creates biological stress. Organic matter is food, but food must be digestible. When thick layers of compost or raw inputs are added repeatedly, decomposition accelerates beyond what soil microbes can manage efficiently, and this creates anaerobic pockets, fluctuating pH levels, and heat spikes at the root zone. Beneficial aerobic bacteria struggle in these conditions. They either shut down or die, leaving space for opportunistic organisms that don't support plant health. The soil may look dark and rich, but biologically it becomes unstable. Another hidden killer of beneficial bacteria is frequent soil disturbance. Tilling, digging, turning beds, or aggressively loosening soil breaks fungal highways and bacterial colonies apart. Living soil really depends on structure. Bacteria form biofilms attached to mineral surfaces and work in cooperation with fungi and roots. When soil is disturbed repeatedly, those networks never mature. The garden, well, it remains in a perpetual early stage of biological development, which means bacteria are constantly rebuilding instead of thriving. Why dryness and overwatering are equally destructive. Water management is often misunderstood in living soil systems. Beneficial bacteria require moisture, but not saturation. Allowing soil to dry completely between waterings kills microbial populations through dehydration. On the other hand, keeping soil constantly wet drives out oxygen, which aerobic bacteria depend on. This creates conditions where harmful anaerobic microbes take over. Living soil works best when moisture levels remain relatively stable, mimicking natural environments where soil is rarely bone dry or flooded for long periods. The overlooked danger of feeding plants instead of feeding microbes. Many gardeners unintentionally starve beneficial bacteria by feeding plants directly. Liquid feeds, even organic ones, often deliver nutrients in forms plants can absorb immediately. When plants bypass microbial exchange, Bacteria lose their role in nutrient cycling. Over time, populations shrink because they are no longer needed. True living soil relies on plants trading sugars for nutrients through microbes. When that relationship is disrupted, soil life declines quietly while plants become more dependent on external inputs. Sometimes cleanliness can actually work against soil life. There's a tendency, especially among gardeners, to keep garden beds a bit too clean. When we remove leaf litter, pull roots after harvest, and clear away every bit of organic debris, we end up eliminating the slow, steady food supply that bacteria really depend on. In natural systems, soil is constantly being fed from above and below through decaying roots, fallen leaves, and those tiny microbial exudates. But when beds are stripped bare, bacteria go through these starvation cycles, which over time really weakens their populations. So, what does thriving living soil actually need instead? Well, beneficial bacteria really thrive under consistency. They need gentle inputs applied slowly, minimal disturbance, steady moisture, and, a continuous supply of organic matter that breaks down gradually. Mulch definitely works better than just dumping compost. When you leave root systems in place, they feed microbes underground long after the plants themselves are gone. Light applications repeated over time, they build resilience rather than stress. Living soil actually improves when gardeners shift from constant intervention to a mindset of stewardship. How can you tell if this mistake has already happened in your garden? Soil that's lost its beneficial bacteria often looks healthy on the surface, but behaves quite poorly. You might notice water draining unevenly, or even pooling where it shouldn't. Sometimes plants show nutrient deficiencies even though you've added amendments. Growth can be quick at first, but then it's weak and short-lived. Pest pressure tends to increase as well. These are all signs that biological balance has been disrupted, not that you need to add even more inputs. Here's the quiet truth about living soil success. Living soil isn't really about doing more. It's about doing less, but doing it more intentionally. The biggest gains come when soil is simply allowed to stabilize and mature biologically. Beneficial bacteria don't need constant help. They just need protection from extremes and, importantly, time to rebuild those networks that took nature years to form. Once this mistake is corrected, gardens often change quite dramatically. Soil becomes so much easier to manage. Plants respond with deeper roots and much steadier growth. Your inputs actually decrease while your results improve. That's really when living soil stops being just a concept and becomes a system that works quietly season after season. If this helped you rethink how you care for soil life, why not share it with another gardener who's trying to do the right thing but feels a bit stuck? And don't forget to subscribe for more grounded, practical insight into building soil that actually stays alive.